Good evening, everyone. My name is Orlando Ramos, Chairman of the Public Safety Subcommittee. This is a Public Safety Subcommittee of the Springfield City Council. I'm joined by my colleagues, Jesse Letterman and Councilor Tracy Whitfield, who are both members of this committee. We're also joined by Councilors, I see Tim Allen, Councilor Davila, Councilor Gomez, and Council President Hurst. Did I miss anybody? And there is one item on the agenda for this evening, which is the discussion of the Springfield Police Department's IIU unit, as well as the Cphb board. I understand there are two representatives from the Springfield Police Department here to represent the IIU. Is there anyone here to represent Cphb?
Me, her.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the purpose of this meeting is, I guess the issues, some of the issues in the police department have been well documented over the last few months. There have been some reports, particularly that the Department of Justice report, which referenced the internal investigations unit and made some recommendations as to how to improve that system. I guess the first thing we should do, and if you give me a second, I'm admitting Councilor Edwards. Councilor Edwards has also joined us. I guess I'd like to begin with the recommendations that were made in the Department of Justice report of July 9th. What improvements have been made to comply with those recommendations from the Department of Justice since then. And what improvements have been made to the Cphb in terms of investigating cases and allegations of police misconduct. And so I'm going to turn it over to the representatives from the Springfield Police Department to explain to us. I guess it would be helpful for us if we understood exactly what the process was before you get into us of how it has been improved. So if you can explain to us what the IIU actually does, how do you investigate cases of alleged police misconduct? And I guess you can begin with how those allegations or those complaints are initiated, because I know that there's more than one way as to how those complaints are initiated. So if we can begin there, I think that would be helpful.
Well, as far as the DOJ recommendations.
Can you introduce yourself so we all know who you are, please?
It's Aaron Butler, Lieutenant in IIU. My recommendations from PERF, as far as I know, and the commissioner is slowly making those changes, including putting me in here and drafting the policy, but that's something that the captain and her are working on. I'm not very knowledgeable about that. I do know that they're making these changes based on the Police Executive Research Forum recommendations. And it's and they're making these changes, but I'm not very familiar with that specifically.
Okay, can you explain to us how you investigate cases and how those complaints come to your department?
Well, you can either go online and you can submit the complaint online and it comes to our email. You can go to the police station, the City Hall Clerk's Office, Indian Orchard Citizens Council, New North Citizen Council, the South End Citizen Council, the Police Department, the Urban League, and all the community police sector offices. You can pick the forms up, drop them off there, or like I said, you can come here, or you can do it directly online, or download the form from the internet, and then you can mail it or hand deliver it. Now, when a complaint comes in, the captain will look at it. We'll make recommendations on whether it should be a special order, a preliminary investigation of employee complaint, or an administrative inquiry. Makes recommendations to the commissioner, and then she decides how that's going to go. If it's an AI or a PI, it's investigated by the officer's immediate supervisor. And if it's a special order, depending on the seriousness of the case, then it'll be investigated by one of my sergeants or myself. Investigate the, and once you're done with it, you have 90 days to complete the investigation. If it's involving department charges, criminal charges are different. It goes.
I don't know if anybody else knows what those acronyms mean, but I'm a little bit lost.
Well, I said administrative inquiry is an AI, and the PI is a preliminary investigation of employee. Those are for minor complaints. And an SO or a special order would be something more serious, and the captain makes that determination, and then the commissioner will, she has obviously the final say on that. So when we do cases, we investigate them, do all the legwork, everything involved. Then it goes to the board. They look at all the information, make the recommendations, and it goes to the chair.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I thought Councilor Victor was going to say something, or is that? Did you have a question for me?
Did you have a? Whoa.
No, I didn't. I was muted, so I hope I was muted.
But we have a hand raised in the chat box, but I'll let you finish your statement, and then we'll get to questions. Go ahead, Lieutenant.
So it starts with the officer's captain, his or her commanding officer. Then it goes to the deputy chief of that section, and then the commissioner, of course, has the final say on where it's going to go from there.
Does your report include a recommendation for discipline, or does that recommendation for discipline come from the CPHB?
That's CPHB. When we investigate, we simply collect the facts and move it forward.
You make no recommendations for discipline?
No,
right.
That's the prerogative of the commissioner. All we do is gather all the facts, witnesses, whatever information is available. We gather it, get reports, do our report, and then move it up the chain of command.
Are there any questions for the Lieutenant, Councilor Whitfield?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions, but first, I wanted to see if we can get a list of all the places that were mentioned that citizens, residents can file a police complaint, because I had no idea that they could go to all those different locations. Is that something that
It's on the police website?
Oh, it's on the police website?
Yep.
Okay. So this one is more for Talia or Ed. Can we get a list of all the new trainings that are scheduled because of the actions of the DOJ report? Because we asked, Councilor Ramos asks this question all the time: what has been implemented? What are the new trainings? And we can never get a straight answer as to what those things are. And so if we could just get a list of the new trainings that have been implemented, scheduled, and anything else that has been implemented because of the DOJ report findings and recommendations, that would be great. The press release that went out that was done was not adequate for me, because it didn't tell what the specific trainings are, and also have these trainings started taking place yet. And so that would be helpful if we could get that list, so that we don't keep asking this question and getting the same response of it's not known, or we don't know, or, I just want to know in writing what it is. And then for the lieutenant, do all the complaints go to the CPHB once you do your review?
Well, there's administrative complaints. So if a sergeant writes up an officer, that wouldn't go to them. That's administrative. So that would go to, it'd be heard by a captain, and the officer, his or her lawyer, and then lawyer for the city representing the supervisor. That's how that's decided. If it's for like a violation of the policy, something minor, but other than that, it would go to the CPHB.
And it's my understanding that the IIU is the team that schedules the CPHB meetings. Is that accurate?
The meetings, if we have a case for review, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes, the administrative assistant here does that.
Why would the IIU team schedule those meetings instead of the CPHB chair or a board member?
Well, they wouldn't know when the case is done, so I don't know how they would be able to do that.
Well, wouldn't you be able to tell them?
Well,
And then they could schedule a meeting that's, better suited for them, so they could get more attendance or try to get as many people at the meeting as possible?
that I don't know. I don't have anything to do with that. It's been like that since before I came up here. The case gets done.
Ed, do you know why it's like that? Talia?
If I may, so the administrative assistant that works in the IIU is, my understanding is she is told when the cases are completed. The CPHB reviews cases in teams, teams of a minimum of 3. And so how it works is each team is assigned a particular week to review cases. And so the administrative assistant will reach out to the leader of a particular team and say, we want to schedule a review for this week. Please let me know when your team is available to meet to review it. Let's say they pick Thursday at 10. So they pick Thursday at 10, and then that team leader will let the administrative assistant know. In addition to that, the team leader will also open up, will send an invitation to the other CPHB members who are not on that team, but we'll say to them, we have this review happening on Thursday at 10. If you would like to attend, then please let me know, and then they can show up and attend.
And what happens after that? Once the 3 or the team reviews the complaint, then what happens?
So once they review the complaint, they keep in mind that the CPHB is reviewing SOs and PIs, not the AIs.
Right.
The administrative inquiries. So
right.
So they review the PIs and they say, okay, the captain investigated the matter. The captain thinks that the person should get this discipline or doesn't think they should get discipline. We agree, or they can say we don't agree and we want to have a hearing so that we can make a different recommendation. In terms of the SOs, the CPHB will say, based upon the investigation, we want more information, and so we want to have a hearing, or we have enough information, and based upon the information that we have, we don't think that we need to have a hearing.
Okay, so they always, the SOs and all the SOs and PIs always go to the CPHB, but it doesn't always make it to a hearing.
Whether or not all PIs, I believe all PIs come to the CPHB, but that's a question that I think Lieutenant Butler can answer. My understanding is that all PIs and all SOs do come to the CPHB, but to answer your question, anything that comes before the CPHB may not go to a hearing, either because the CPHB doesn't think that it's necessary or for some other reason.
Okay, and that will be my final question, Counselor Ramos, for Lieutenant Butler. Do all SOs and all PIs go to the CPHB?
Yes.
All?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to Lieutenant Butler. My apologies for that quick overview. Solicitor, good to see you. And attorney, good afternoon. I got some quick questions for the lieutenant. Lieutenant, in the IIU, how many captains are currently there?
In IIU, there's a captain, the lieutenant, myself, and I have 3 sergeants and the administrative assistant.
But it's only the captains that review the complaints, correct?
When they first come in, is that what you're referring to?
Yep, correct.
Yeah, when they first come in, the captain reviews the complaints.
Okay. I'm sorry, and how many captains do you have in the department?
Just in our department, there's 1 captain in charge. He's in charge of the IIU. And then,
Just 1.
yeah, and then I'm here as lieutenant, and then there's 3 sergeants and a civilian.
So who's that captain in the IU?
Larry Murphy.
Okay. So when a complaint comes in, Captain Murphy reviews the complaint, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So basically it's just one person.
Well, he reviews it and then he makes his recommendations to the commissioner and then she makes the final decision.
Right, but my bigger point is initially when that complaint first comes in, only one person gets to review that case.
Yes, he reviews it.
Now, is there any kind of criteria that is used to determine the, I don't want to use the word validity, but the assertion of the complaint, or is this at the discretion of Captain Murphy?
Every complaint gets investigated regardless of what it says. Investigate everything.
So when you say investigated, you mean?
It will be investigated by either the officer's immediate supervisor or by this unit. But either way, it's going to get investigated.
Okay, so there will actually be a follow-up regardless of the nature.
Yeah.
Yes.
Daniel, the captain's just there to make sure that the complaint gets to the right person that needs to review it, whether it's the person's direct supervisor or, you know, it needs to go to where his guys are actually investigating. And he's just kind of like making sure
Administrative door. Okay.
all complaints get investigated.
Okay, and this is Deputy
Daniel, yes,
Daniel.
how you doing?
Good to hear you, Deputy. And so, thank you. And so you said about 90 days follow-up for investigation. Is that 90 days for the officers, the current officers, correct?
Yes.
Of the supervisors? Okay. Now,
Yes.
is that 90 days from the moment that IU learns of the complaint or 90 days after the alleged incident occurred?
When the incident allegedly occurred.
So 90 days, okay. So it could be 2 years down the road and those 90 days won't kick in until that moment, correct?
Yeah, from the date of whenever the incident happened. So if it happened September 1st, then you have 90 days. Person comes and makes a complaint, it goes back 90 days, it has to be done within 90 days. For the supervisors.
No, I'm talking for,
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's two different criteria for these. There's two different criteria. Did I understand? Say that again. I'm sorry. I'm confused.
I'm sorry, it's for patrolman, it's when it gets reported.
Okay. What about, so you got even 2 years on the road, something happened today, 2 years on the road, they got 90 days from the moment that IIU learns of the alleged incident, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now for the supervisors, is that the same procedure?
No, it's from the allegedly when it actually happened.
Okay, so it's the same thing basically then for the supervisors as well. Or did I miss something, Lieutenant?
No, for the supervisors, it's when it actually happened, and for patrolman, it's when the person comes and reports it. So it could be two different days. Those would be
Right. So would you be able to speak as to why the difference, why that
collective bargaining.
collective bargaining? Okay, fair enough. All right, now, as part of, and I know you say it goes to the CPHB board, and then a decision is made. Will you be able to speak, or maybe the Deputy Daniels, as part of the discipline process, is remedial training included as part of remedial or some sort of discipline?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, we believe in progressive discipline here, so we can start off with just retraining a person. That's what we're going to go to most of the time, obviously for minor complaints and stuff like that. But you know, if anything, it starts at retraining, and we can go up to dismissal, depending on the seriousness of the allegation.
All right, thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Lieutenant. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Before we go to the next question, we're also joined by Councilor Fenton. Councilor Letterman, you had a question?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all the guests for being here. Lieutenant and Deputy, is it just Lieutenant and the Deputy there? It says and company.
Yeah, just two of us.
Okay, all right. So you indicated the complaint comes in via these various forms. And every complaint is reviewed by the captain and then investigated by the team or by the officer supervisor, depending on the nature of the complaint. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So what determines whether a complaint is forwarded to the CPHB?
They all go to the CPHB.
So all complaints go to the
Yeah,
CPHB with the exception of administrative complaints?
Right, those don't go to the CPHB.
So those are handled in-house because they came from the officer's supervisor?
Yeah, that'd be like something like the guy's constantly late for roll call. That's not something the CPB really needs to worry about. You know, we take care of those kind of things. Or uniform violations, we take care of.
Right. So what if an officer's supervisor, would an officer's supervisor make a complaint that went beyond that went to more a violation of policy or a violation of criminal law? Would that be a different, a supervisor could certainly make that complaint, but would that be different from an administrative complaint?
Absolutely. Just because that's what the captain comes in. He kind of determines whether it's an administrative thing or if it's something a lot more serious. If it's a serious violation, then I'll go for an investigation. If it's criminal, then we'll turn it over to the DB or to the DA's office.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so once a complaint gets to the CPHB, how does the CPHB determine whether they'll hold a hearing on that complaint?
Okay, that one I would like to refer to either Talia or
Sure.
Attorney Pakula.
So the CPHB looks at a few things. The first thing that they look at is the information that they have available during, the information that they have when they're reviewing the case. So as Lieutenant Butler mentioned, every single complaint is investigated. So literally, if somebody comes up and they write, I don't know, I hate chicken and I told the police officer and he didn't do anything about it, and that's their complaint. Somebody investigates, that comes before the CPHB as, let's say, a pie. The CPHB may look at that and say, okay, based upon the facts, I don't see that an officer has done anything wrong, violated a policy, possibly done anything criminal, anything of that nature. I don't need to hear any more facts, so I don't need to have a hearing. If there's another complaint that has more, there are more facts where an officer is actually involved, and there's a question about if the officer had probable cause to search a car or something of that nature, where they think there might be a legal violation or a rule violation, and they want to learn more facts, or they want to give the opportunity to the parties to express more, show more evidence, if you will, or they want to see live testimony, then they will schedule a hearing.
Okay, and so who do they make that decision within the pods that have been set up, or do they make that decision whether or not to move forward to the hearing as a whole body?
They make that decision within the pods.
So they vote within the pod.
Yes.
Whether or not to move forward. Okay.
And so just, you know, sometimes they may have legal questions that come up,
Sure.
and that is something that myself and a member of IIU are there to assist them to answer.
Okay. So then we'll stick with you, Attorney G, for a couple, and then I have one last question for IIU and the police department. But so if they they have an initial meeting, say they decide that in fact, you know, they do want more information, they want to have a hearing, or they feel that some sort of misconduct took place, they will indicate that, I presume, move forward, schedule a hearing. So within the pod, they'll come to a determination that they bring to the full body.
So within the review, they decide that they want to have a hearing. IIU then takes that case and schedules it for a hearing before the whole body. And with the officer involved, and then an attorney from labor relations will, or perhaps the law department, will work with the complainant, if you will, to schedule that hearing and interview them and prepare and present that case.
So then the CPHB, do they ultimately rule in their opinion on whether or not to sustain the complaint?
Yes. So what will happen is after they decide that this is going to a hearing, a charge letter will be issued to an officer. And in that charge letter, it will essentially say what policies they may have violated. And so when you have this hearing, an attorney is really almost showing their case or presenting their case that this officer did violate each part of that, each policy that's listed on that charge letter.
Who would make that argument? Who would present essentially in favor of whoever made the complaint? Who would present that evidence to the CPHB?
So either an attorney from the law department or an attorney from labor relations.
No.
Would argue
No.
would argue in the
Law department does not prosecute misconduct. The exception is Attorney Alicia Days, who is specially appointed by the mayor because she doesn't get involved with the defense of police officers. And so she may be assigned to prosecute the excessive force claims. That being said, all the others are done by labor relations attorneys.
Correct.
Okay.
And my apology for misspeaking. That's correct.
That's all right. Okay. And so then ultimately, if the CPHB, after that whole process, sustains the complaint, says, yes, we think the evidence is there, this misconduct took place, they say, yes, this happened, and then they make their recommendation for discipline.
Correct.
Do we know how many complaints have been sustained and recommendations for discipline have been made in the last, say, 2 years?
They're all listed on the CPHB website, all the statistics every quarter. There's a statistical analysis and there's a table showing all complaints and how they were disposed of. There's goes across showing the date, who reviewed it, when they reviewed it, etc. So there's a statistical quarterly analysis and a table every quarter.
So I'll look at that, but do you know off the top of your head?
There's roughly 100 per year.
That are heard?
Excuse me?
100 per year that are sustained and that recommendation for discipline is made?
No, there's approximately 100 complaints per year.
Okay. There are 100 complaints per year, and then a portion of those are heard and a portion of those are sustained, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. And then my final question for the lieutenant is, could you just describe your relationship or role with the CPHB process a little more? I understand you bring the initial investigation, but for example, if there's more evidence needed, does CPHB ask for that, or is there a process for them to get more information, or is it that the information presented is the information presented?
No, if they want more information, I've never seen it happen before, so I don't know from my personal experience, but my understanding is if that's an issue, then that can be done.
Okay. Okay.
Councilor Letterman, if I may.
Sure.
To answer your question, if a case comes before the CPHB and they don't have enough information, they don't feel they have enough information before them to determine that they want to either have a hearing or not sustain this complaint, they may send it back to IIU and say, we want more information investigated. Can you please let us know about maybe this particular issue or something else? And then the case may come back.
And I, in the times that I've been involved, I have seen cases where the CPHB has said, well, what about this witness? Why wasn't that witness contacted? Or that sort of thing. And I've seen IIU come back and say, we tried, or we'll try again, but typically there's been some effort and they haven't been able to do it. But that's the first step in the CPHB is whether IIU has completed a thorough investigation. That's the first thing they do in the review. The second is what she said. Where does it go from here? Do we have a hearing? Do we send it back for the commissioner's discretion or recommendation that there's nothing further to do?
Thank you.
Councilor Hurst.
Thank you, President Ramos, or Chairman Ramos. A couple questions. I'm not so sure I've heard what has changed since the DOJ report. What is different?
If I may, a lot of the things are in the process. For example, the DOJ report specifically mentioned the IIU policy. As a result, a new policy is being formulated. The last step to that involved the law department review. I believe the comments and suggestions the law department had have been sent back to the police department after they vetted it. And so we're on the verge of having a new policy come out under the IIU.
So is that, so will anything change that we've discussed here? Or are you not at, or are you not able to say that at the moment? I mean, well,
a lot of things already have. I can tell you that whether they're in the policy that's formal or not, I know the commissioner has started doing other things. For example, the CPHB had questions, often has questions about what the standards are for a certain policy, for use of force, or a search, or what have you. The commissioner has added a step, for example, that it go to the academy, and the academy provide information as to the standards that are applicable, so that the criteria of whether it's misconduct or not can be better satisfied. You know, that's an example of something.
okay.
I wanted Councilor Whitfield had asked for a complete listing, and I will work to provide a complete listing of all the changes and specific changes that have been made so that you can have them all in writing.
Okay. So I will wait for those, and you'll get this new policy to us, I'd imagine, as soon as it's finalized, correct?
I will do that.
Okay. So I guess my other question is, have we ever thought about hiring an outside attorney to represent the complainant? And then I guess I'll also add, I'm sorry, I'm breaking up a little bit here. Hello?
Hello.
Sorry, go ahead.
So an example of doing that is Nathan Bills, where initially attorney Tom Kokanowski was retained as an outside independent counsel to pursue this. Right now, attorney Markey has been hired. He's an outside attorney to prosecute that. So we have had situations where we have brought in an outside attorney. Attorney Days from, I know she is in the law department, but she doesn't get involved in the defense of police cases, and therefore she went to the mayor personally and said that she wanted to get involved in prosecuting excessive force cases. And so the mayor has specially assigned her, because of her skills as a prosecutor as well as a defense attorney, to prosecute. So she is our in-house outside. You know, she doesn't get involved in the defensive cases like Attorney D'Souza or Attorney St. Laurent or Attorney or myself, Attorney Safransky, but she does prosecute cases that go to the hearing level.
Okay, so
now in contrast, Attorney G, she represents just the board to advise them procedurally and to assist them. She's not a prosecutor on these cases. She helps administer the board. So we have lots of
so the actual complainant is represented by an attorney in HR. Is that, or by a labor attorney? Is that correct?
Or Attorney Days.
Or Attorney Days.
Or an outside attorney.
Or an outside attorney. And so have we thought about, and I think, you know, my fear is that these complainants are not getting the best representation. So that would be my first issue. And then my second concern would be that from the outside looking in, I mean, it seems like it could be more transparent if we contracted with an outside attorney to assist the complainant, and I'm sure the complainant would feel a bit more comfortable if that occurred. And I'm not 100% sure that that's possible, but it definitely seems like something we should look into. You know, HR is certainly another arm of the city. And so, you know, I also would like to know the level of expertise and not by the level of expertise, I mean that, you know, the amount of years of the attorneys that we're using to represent the complainants. How many years do they have in, you know, in the, or how many years do they have being an attorney? You know, how familiar are they with representing cases of this nature? You know, it just seems to me that we want to make sure that we're getting adequate representation for those individuals who are filing these complaints.
I can respond a little. Number one, I'd be happy to get you some qualifications of the attorneys as they're doing it. I will provide that to you. Number two, in terms of an outside attorney, we don't represent the complainant. Technically, you're representing the management of the police department. And, you know, there's many times when a complainant has an outside attorney, the most common thing we run into is an outside attorney refusing to let their client cooperate. That is due to the fact that many times these are connected with criminal matters, and so people have a right to remain silent. So there may be a complaint that's generated, but as you say, the complainant may also be a criminal defendant who doesn't want to participate in the CPHB process while they have criminal case charges pending. So that would be a situation where, due to extenuating circumstances, we seek to expand on the time period between when we can bring the charges or try to hold the hearing, until we wait until the criminal charges may have been disposed of, and then the victim, if you will, it's easier to have them come forward. So that's a complicated issue of how we relate to outside attorneys. As I said, many have their own, but technically it's management that is the complainant once it goes to prosecuting these matters.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So my recommendation would just be to make sure that we have someone who is well versed in what it is that they're doing, so that they can adequately present the necessary information to the board themselves, so that they can in turn make a good decision on behalf of both the complainant and the city, for that matter.
And that's exactly why Attorney Days asked the mayor to get involved. She thought there was a need, and so she has helped provide that because she has such a good background.
Okay.
And as I said, we have had other situations where we've literally gone outside. But
so that actually raises more. Hello? I think I might have cut off.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
You can hear me, okay. Well, so I'll wrap it up. I think that actually, the fact that Attorney Days felt the need to ask the mayor to try excessive force cases, I can only imagine what has occurred prior to that, and the type of representation folks have received. So anyhow, I won't belabor the point. I think the final thing that I'll state is that in terms of those filing a complaint, Mr. Chair, it would seem to me those organizations where folks can file a complaint at probably need to know that they are actual places where people can file a complaint, and whoever is the staff or the administrators of those, they probably know where to act.
I'm sorry, we're losing you.
Or to wherever it needs to go. Go ahead. So I'll defer to Councilor Fenton, Councilor Ramos.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read your op-ed and I thought you made some good points. My question is about this 120-day business. And I'm wondering, well, I have two questions, but this is the first one. I'm wondering if there's anybody on the call that has performed any type of survey regarding what other similar communities have for collective bargaining of this kind. You know, are there any other police departments, for example, Worcester, Lawrence, Lowell, Boston, Brockton, etc., that have a similar requirement? And if so, what's the period of time that they stipulate to?
Counselor, if you don't mind me answering that question first, if there's anybody, I don't know if there's anybody else that has specifics, but I have been in contact with several different organizations that are assisting me in gathering that information so that we can have some comparable language from other cities. But go ahead and I'll let you continue.
Thank you for that. Is there anybody here on behalf of the supervisors of the law department that have any of that information?
I am not sure. I don't know. I know that we have language. I know that we've negotiated. I know the supervisors, we reached an agreement to extend that. I know DOJ had sought us to extend it. We've reported to DOJ. They seemed happy with the results so far. They seem satisfied the 120 days. I think that I think it's a vast improvement. I've asked Lieutenant Butler his experience with and the challenges he's faced with 90, and you can ask him to explain how he thinks 120 will improve that, if it will. But personally, I do not know what other departments do.
Okay. And then the second is just more of a reflection than it is a question. And this is about the social media policy. I talked about it at the last meeting, and I think that it was well-intended and has served some purpose since being enacted, but it's creating now, a few years after its implementation, in my opinion, more problems than it's solving. And I know why we did it, and I know why we have it, but nevertheless, I'm concerned about its continued implementation. And this isn't just with respect to supervisors. I'd be asking this if it was carpenters in the Parks Department that were coming up for review. I think that speech in 2020 and in the social media age is very different in terms of the ways that we communicate and the forums in which that communication takes place. And I'm concerned about the ongoing implementation of the policy, not just for police supervisors, but for all municipal staff. And so those are my two primary interests, Mr. Chairman, in the review of this contract, the 120-day requirement and the social media piece. I bring them up to state my interests in both of those matters. But the underlying issue that's before us is whether or not this contract for the supervisors is reasonable and should be affirmed by the council. It's not our role to negotiate it, and it's not our role to renegotiate it. Our role is to decide whether or not the city can afford it, and we can, and whether or not it's reasonable on its terms. And while I have some questions about it, and I'm grateful for this hearing to have an opportunity to delve further into these important subjects, I still think that we should be approving the contract because I think it meets the standards of review that are required for us for approval. So that's my 2 cents, and I'll turn it back over to you.
I appreciate your thoughts, Counselor, and I'll have that information for the next, hopefully by the next public safety meeting on the 27th, where we will be discussing the police supervisor's contract. Counselor Gomez and then Counselor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just been listening to all of my colleagues and listening to the questions, listening to the answers. And, you know, we want to make sure that obviously, you know, when it comes to collective bargaining, that, you know, regardless of what union is at the table, that obviously they're getting their fair share. And, you know, like what Council Fenton said, we don't negotiate, but we look at the actual language of this this document and make sure that it's sound and it's feasible. I think, you know, traditionally right now, and what Councilor Fenton had brought up was something that I didn't want to get into the weeds, but since he opened the door, I'm going to walk right through it. And it's, you know, in particular to when we're talking, I think what Councilor Letterman was talking about of, you know, who investigates, how they investigate. And I think Councilor Davila was trying to, brought up a good point, that listening to the response of the police department on how it falls onto through the captain, and then obviously it goes down to an investigation. Regardless, it goes to the CVHB, and then from there, in particular, after my comments, my question in particular is just to trying to better understand I apologize, I was broken into. Well, I was broken up. My question is there kind of like and maybe because I've been having connection issues. I've been having connection issues. I apologize. What is there like a rubrics or kind of like a scale? Because I heard one of the officers had spoken, or one of the I think the lieutenants spoke about that there's like a progressive way of you know, way of that they operate, and, you know, figure out at what level and the reprimand, and how they investigate it, and how it's looked into after the fact the complaint is given. Is there like a specific, like, I guess like a guideline that we're privy to, depending on the seriousness of the complaint? Let it be if it was a policy or procedure, because most of the social media complaints that have came to the attention of the city council, in respect, has come from inside of the department or inside of the city. Like some city employees have made the complaints obviously anonymously, and they've come from inside of the different departments to be transparent, and then it's really up to the narrative of who's interpreting them, that if they're to be fireable, or, you know, I know that's not part of what we're discussing, but when it comes to kind of the social media, at what point and where, and who is the one that is kind of interpreting the narrative to let go an officer or fire or somebody from service, you know? And that's something that I'm really, really interested in, to say the least. My question specifically is, so I can, because I was just like running around it, is there a certain like rubrics or a scale? Because he said that there's a progressive scaling of trying to understand, you know, outside of the CBHB, that gives us a recommendation to the administration, or to the chief, or to the commissioner to make her decision.
So I think you're talking about a sort of a hodgepodge of matters there. Let me start by saying progressive discipline is a requirement that is in all of the collective bargaining agreements. And what it means is that under all the union contracts, you have to look at the past disciplinary history of the employee, and the discipline progresses. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be fired until you have, you know, been warned, suspended, repeatedly suspended, and terminated. You can go from incident number 1 to termination, even if we have progressive discipline. So that's one issue of what progressive discipline is. and it's based on an employee's past experience. There's another issue, and that is the comparison of discipline for offenses. And that is something that we are trying to put into place with what's called a matrix, or a rubric, if you will. And we do have some samples that we've gotten from, for example, the Baltimore Police Department and some other police departments, where we've tried to put together a scale to give a range of discipline that would be appropriate on any given police disciplinary matter. So, and then the third issue is non-bargaining employees. So for example, the social media policy is something that can be put into effect for non-bargaining employees and has been into effect. Social media policies with bargaining has to be negotiated. And I don't believe it is in all 27 of our union contracts. But where we don't have it in a union contract, we have had even terminations rather than as a violation of social media policy on the basis of other rules and regulations that maybe, for example, whether the department was placed in a bad light, whether there has been, you brought some disrespect to the department, those types of rules, which may not be totally a social media policy, but may be based on conduct arising from social media. So so that's sort of a continuum of issues. I hope I've spoken to some of the points that you were looking for, and if there's some more pointed questions you have.
It wasn't more pointed. I just think that in the interim, I know that you're putting together and working through some of this reforms, you know, working with the DOJ and with the department, trying to figure out, you know, what is the best, I guess, best way to handle some of these situations. And just because Counselor Fenton had brought it up, because sometimes even in the interim of, you know, who's the one determining, and, you know, a social media post as being super flagrant to being just rash, and having like a progressive scale of saying, okay, this is your first strike, this is your second strike. Because in essence, when it comes to, you know, who interprets it outside of this administration and, you know, the city of Springfield, you know, sometimes it just looks like in the community and the community folks that I've been talking about, it just looks like the social media policy has been weaponized to target certain individuals. And you know, at the end of the day, I don't want to even dig into the weeds of that. I just want to as long as I know that we're looking at, like you stated, when we look into the progressive way of scaling it out, if it's going to be kind of like a matrix or a rubrics, that essentially, you know, I just don't want to get into, and talking to some of our colleagues, if we have to really look at that and create some kind of legislation that speaks to that, making sure that it's clear, concise, and it's understood, instead of just a person saying, hey, watch what you post on social media, because depending on who interprets it and who feels disrespected, you might lose your job. Because we have lost careers. People have lost their careers over a figment of, you know, feeling that their freedom of speech maybe has, because I've looked into it and I've seen some kind of, you know, people getting their jobs back or leading up us open to pending litigation, which I'm not gonna, you know, get into, but it just a little worrisome. And I just wanted to just get a better hand on it, just because he had opened the door and I just walked through it. And I didn't want to get too much into it because we're talking specifically about the contract. And obviously the length of time, definitely, Mr. Chairman, is what I'm really, really concerned about, specifically trying to understand, you know, when people do want to come forward and the victim feels that they're not going to have some consequences or repercussions. We understand that we want to protect our law enforcement officials and also the city of Springfield, but sometimes victims need their day and understanding of find a way to actually open up on their transgressions and things that are going on with them. So I yield, and thank you for your answer, sir.
Thank you, Counselor. And we won't be discussing the contract actually until the next meeting on the 27th. That is the meeting that I scheduled for the purpose of discussing the supervisor's contract. Just a time check. We're out of time. The next meeting is scheduled for 5:30 for finance. Counselor Letterman, if you have a quick question,
I'll yield, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, but I know Counselor Whitfield has a packed agenda as well.
Okay. All right. Just one final question to Deputy Chief and the Lieutenant. Where is the IIU actually located?
130 Maple Street.
Okay. And all of that information is available on your website, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I just want to thank everybody for attending this meeting. I'll discuss with my colleagues whether or not we want to have a follow-up meeting regarding this issue. I want to go back to, in closing, go back to what Councilor Hurst said, which is I don't hear too many changes that have been made since the DOJ report has come out. And so that was the purpose of this meeting, was to get an update as to what changes have occurred in the IIU and or the CPHB since the DOJ report. I didn't hear many changes other than the fact that the complaints are now being accepted online, which is encouraging, but we need to move forward with some other recommendations that were mentioned in the DOJ report. So I'll consider whether or not I want to schedule a follow-up meeting. I think at some point we do want to revisit this conversation and check on the progress. But for now, I just want to thank everybody for attending, and we'll move on to the finance meeting. So thank you all. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you.